Hey everybody, this is TJR. Back in 1991, there was an Elton John tribute album released entitled Two Rooms. It featured a wide variety of rock artists, everybody from The Who, Eric Clapton, Kate Bush, both rock and pop artists covering Elton John songs. It was a very, in my opinion, very well-made tribute album. I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of great renditions of Elton John songs. If you know me, you know that Elton John is basically my reason for being. He's the reason I wanted to become a musician in the first place. And now, in 2018, there have been two Elton John tribute albums that have been released simultaneously. One is entitled Revamp, the other is entitled Restoration. Now, Revamp features a lot of contemporary pop artists covering Elton. Restoration features contemporary country music artists covering Elton. Now, interestingly enough, you may notice there's no album featuring rock artists, which kind of tells you the state of rock and roll within the popular culture right now. But that's a whole nother discussion for another day. So I thought it would be interesting to just kind of give my thoughts on these two albums track by track. I'm going to start with Revamp, which is the pop album. Up first is Benny and the Jets, performed by Pink and Logic. Although Elton John is listed actually in the performance, I think it's because they sample a little bit of his piano playing and a little bit of his voice, but I don't think he's actually playing on this remake here. Now, this is a much more hip-hop version. Pink does some very good vocals. I like the rap that Logic does in the middle of the song. I don't think it feels, condescending like, hey, let's put a rapper in there so the kids will buy it. It doesn't feel that way at all. I think it all works really well. I'm surprised at how much I liked this version because it really does strip away the rock piano that it's known for and replaces it with, hip-hop beats and styles. And so, very different. I really enjoyed this one. Up next is Coldplay with We All Fall in Love Sometimes. Now, this is a song off of the Captain Fantastic album, which is probably my absolute favorite Elton John album of all time. And We All Fall in Love Sometimes is one of my absolute favorite Elton John songs. It's one of those songs that was never a big hit. So, for me, the bar is very high if you're going to meet this. Now, the Coldplay version tries to be more ethereal. It's interesting. It's, it's nice. But we lose the maudlin emotion, I think, of the original with that. I think we really lose all the heartbreak kind of feelings with it to a certain extent. It's a nice version, but for me, it just doesn't quite get there. I'd rather hear the original version. After that is Alyssa Cara with I Guess That's Why They Call It the Blues. Now, this was one of those later hits by Elton John during what I call his lost period. There was a time period, I think, after 1980 where most critics will say that he lost his way, and he'll even admit that too, that he didn't find his way back until the beginning of the new century in 2000 when he released Songs from the West Coast. This is one of those nice hits that he did, though. It was a nice song. I kind of like this version a little better. It's a little bit more soulful, a little bit more bluesy, and I like it for that reason. Then we have Ed Sheeran doing Candle in the Wind, another of one of my favorite Elton John songs of all time, and I know it's on a lot of people's lists of favorite Elton John songs of all time. I know America loves Ed Sheeran. In fact, the world loves Ed Sheeran, and I'll admit he's a talented performer. I've watched him perform live. He's very, very good live. His music has never really connected with me the way it does with everybody else in the world. Yeah, I know. Everybody likes Ed. I don't hate him or anything. He's just never connected with me. And this version, I think it loses all the majesty of the original. And for me, I would rather hear the original version. So this version, I'm sorry, just doesn't cut it for me. Ed, I'm sure you're a nice guy. You seem like a really great guy. At some point, I think your music's going to connect with me, but it hasn't so far. After that, we have Florence and the Machine doing Tiny Dancer. Now, at first, when I started to listen to this rendition, I was a bit apprehensive. I noticed that she simplified that iconic opening piano intro and just made it very sparse. And I thought, I don't know if this is going to work. But then, as the song progresses, more instrumentation comes in. And in particular, what I thought was really beautiful was the use of a harp. I thought that just added so much. But what's interesting about this version is it remains faithful, but it changes the instrumentation in numerous ways that I think are both subtle and sublime. And by the end of it, it's completely her rendition, and yet somehow it stays faithful to the original, and it maintains all the emotional and majesty and impact of the original. So definitely I enjoyed this rendition of Tiny Dancer. Track 6 is Someone Saved My Life Tonight, performed by Mumford & Sons. This is the only hit single off of the Captain Fantastic album and another real favorite of mine. I'm afraid this version doesn't quite, to me, really meet up to the original. This kind of folk, semi-quasi-folk country western version just doesn't quite get there. I think that interpretation could work. Something about the vocal performance, the instrumentation, it seems to lack the desperation that I hear in the original version. Elton's vocal, the desperation that the main character feels leading up to the chorus, talking about how he almost, threw his whole life away, but then someone saved my life tonight, and then there's that huge, glorious, cathartic, religious zeal to that chorus. And to me, none of that gets captured in this version, so I prefer the original over this version. After that, we have Mary J. Blige performing Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word. Sometimes I think it's really cool when I hear R&B versions of classic rock songs. Bettye LaVette comes to mind. I loved the work she's done with that. I was really kind of anxious to hear what this might sound like, and it just didn't do it for me. The vocal melody is radically changed, radically changed, along with the instrumentation. And like I said, I've heard Bettye LaVette take classic rock songs, completely change the melodies drastically, and go, oh my God, I love this. This is great. But this one, I'm afraid, wasn't doing it for me, so I prefer the original over this remake. Up next is Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Q-Tip and Demi Lovato. This is track 8, and I have to start off by saying that Don't Go Breaking My Heart is probably one of my least favorite Elton John hits. I really did not like that song back when it came out. I thought it was way too cheesy, and not in a good way. I do like a lot of cheesy 70s music, but this just did not do it for me. I didn't like it then. I have not really cared much for the song now. So what's surprisingly great about this is just how much I am enjoying this remake. The vibe and feel is different. It's got a more laid back, more, kind of just chill kind of vibe to it. And it works really well. And so it just goes to show, sometimes a different take can totally change how you feel about a song. Enjoying the remake of Don't Go Breaking My Heart much more than the original. This is one of the few times you're going to hear me say this in this video. Then we have track 9, Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter's. This is, of course, originally from Honky Chateau, performed by the Killers. This song, this rendition, removes all of Elton's quasi-classical piano stylings and replaces it with what I could best describe as like soundscapes. Very minimalist playing, lots of textural soundscapes. I'm afraid it doesn't work for me. The vocal performance, the instrumentation, none of it works for me very well. Not too interested in this version, much more prefer the original. Next we have Daniel, performed by Sam Smith, and I was definitely curious about this. I really enjoyed this version. It starts with just a very sparse guitar performing that opening melody that you know from the original, that was originally performed on an electric keyboard, da 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 da, and played on guitar, very sparse, with Sam Smith's very soulful vocals, and it really works beautifully. After that, we have Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. This is track 11, performed by Miley Cyrus. I feel that Miley Cyrus really did an admirable job with this particular version, and I think her vocals have improved a lot over the last few years. She's really, I think, developed her range, and it certainly shows in this rendition. However, though, for whatever reason, this version is just not clicking with me as strongly as I think it should. I still much more prefer the original version, but I do give her kudos for taking a stab at it. This is not an easy song to sing, and once again, I think she does do an admirable job. I think if I was going to hear a remake, I'd rather hear George Michael's stellar remake of this song. If it's any consolation to you, Miley, you sing this song much better than probably I'll ever be able to. I just wish this version had connected with me more. Then we have track 12, Your Song, performed by Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga, I'm going to have to do some kind of an analysis of her at some point. I really feel, or at least I have this theory, that Lady Gaga during her early stages recorded some of the most awful, atrocious music that she could, because she knew that's the only way to get on radio at that point in time. In order to get on radio, you just had to create really just awful, annoying music. And then once she got on radio, once she had all these hits and everything and built a huge name for herself, then she said, okay, let me show you how talented I really am. And she was, suddenly we saw, oh, she's a great singer. She's a really good musician. And that all changed. And so I was really looking forward to this version. She starts off with kind of the gentleness of the original, but then she lets it build and become more flamboyant and bigger and larger. And I wanted to like it, but it just didn't work for me. Nothing wrong with how she's singing or playing, but it just wasn't connecting. I prefer the more low-key, more gentle version of the original. And that concludes Revamp. Overall, I enjoyed this collection. And now, let's switch gears and check out Restoration. This collection features primarily country music artists, both newer artists and older artists performing Elton songs. And to start off, we have Rocket Man, performed by Little Big Town. I think what I really liked about this remake was just the beautiful, lush harmonies. To a certain extent, I was reminded of the remake of Daniel done by Wilson and Phillips on the album Two Rooms that I mentioned earlier. They did nothing really to reinvent the song, but their lush harmonies really brought it to a whole nother level. I feel like something similar was achieved with Little Big Town's version of Rocket Man. Enjoyed this version. Next, after that, track 2, we have Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters making a comeback on this disc. I have to admit, I really liked Maren Morris's rendition much better than the one done by the Killers on the other disc. Her version, a bit more soulful. Do enjoy that aspect of it. Still, like the original better, but I do enjoy hearing this particular remake. Now next is Sacrifice, performed by Don Henley and Vince Gill. It's no surprise to me that Don Henley would be on this album. After all, the Eagles, I feel, are largely the architects of what we refer to as today's modern country. And Vince Gill, no surprise to see him with Don Henley. After all, he's been filling in with the Eagles' current tour, so no surprise seeing them together. This is not one of my favorite Elton John hits. This is from that middle period I spoke of earlier, and this song never did a whole lot for me. This remake is fine. I guess it does a good job, but it doesn't do anything to make me like the song that much more than I did prior, which wasn't a whole lot. So perhaps I'm just not the audience for this song. Up next, we have Take Me to the Pilot, performed by Brothers Osborne. The moment this rendition started, my reaction was, okay, now we're talking. They take the original song, which I describe as a very soulful gospel tune, and turn it into a soulful blues tune with a bit of a funky vibe. Really, really liked this rendition of Take Me to the Pilot. Awful lot. Thumbs up. Up next is My Father's Gun, performed by Miranda Lambert. And this song is off of Tumbleweed Connection. It is one of the more epic songs from that album, and one of Elton's more epic songs. It clocks in at over 6 minutes. This version is shortened down a little bit, but I still really like it in spite of that fact. I think there's a certain resonance to hearing a woman sing it versus a man sing it. The original song is about a young Confederate soldier who buries his father and then takes his father's gun to rejoin the battle. And it tells the story from the side of the South. And so I think it's fascinating to hear it sung by a woman. I think she does a great job with singing the song, and the arrangement is very good. It stays mostly faithful. A little bit shorter, but I still like this version. Of course, love the original, but do like this rendition here. Up next is I Want Love, performed by Chris Stapleton. Chris Stapleton is one of those music artists that I've been saying to myself I really need to listen to more of his stuff, and I still plan on doing that. This rendition, all I can say is that it's very faithful to the original, really. I really liked the original version of this song from Songs of the West Coast, and I really felt like with this song, Elton John was doing a very good John Lennon with this particular track. This remake doesn't do anything to try to reinvent it or reimagine it in any way. The vocal stylings are pretty much spot on with the original. The instrumentation feels pretty much spot on with the original. It's, you know, well done, but I think I'm going to just stick with the original. I didn't really hear anything with this version that really stood out that made me think, okay, this is, you know, something that I will want to listen to alongside the original. Then we have Honky Can't. Performed by Leanne Womack. This song is originally off of Honky Chateau. And wow, do I like this rendition. First of all, it replaces the piano with guitar. And it infuses just the right amount of blues and country, creating a country blues hybrid. You're just going to have to listen to this one for yourself. Really well done. Thumbs up huge on this one. Really love this version. Up next is Casey Musgraves performing Roy Rogers, a song from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I've enjoyed the original a great deal, and I enjoy this remake a great deal. Now, Casey Musgraves also doesn't really try to reinvent this track. She just subtly alters it a little bit. Maybe she slightly changes some of the vocal phrasings. The tempo is maybe just a little bit more upbeat. It's just all very subtle. It works. It makes it enjoyable, just like the original was enjoyable, but gives you something new to listen to at the same time. Next is Please, performed by Rhonda Vincent and Dolly Parton. Now, this is a track from the album Made in England. This is during that period that I refer to as kind of the lost period. I, for the most part, kind of ignored a lot of the releases that came out during that time. Someday I'm going to have to listen to the albums that were from that period. This, I believe, if I remember correctly, encompasses From Victim of Love, just prior to Songs from the West Coast, that entire time period. And take a look at those albums, maybe do some analysis of it. But first I better do analysis of the period prior to that. I think that's more important. So this particular track, I actually was not that familiar with it. I had to go back and listen to the original. I have to admit this song just doesn't do anything for me. The original doesn't really do anything for me, so the remake's not really doing anything for me. It's not really adding anything new. No offense to Rhonda Vincent and Dolly Parton. You're both very good performers, but just this song, I just don't think it just doesn't really do a whole lot for me. So enough said about that. Wow, look at the time. We're already at track 11. Sad Songs Say So Much, performed by, is it Dierks Bentley or Derek Bentley? I'm not 100% sure I'm supposed to pronounce that. I'm sure someone on the internet will correct me. This was not one of my favorite Elton John hits. I mean, it was okay. I didn't mind it. Didn't hate it. It was just kind of there for me. I think I like this version a little bit better. I much more prefer the grittier, more Americana / country infused instrumentation over the very kind of thin 80s production of the original. So definitely liking that. The vocal performance is fine. It's very faithful to the original vocal melody, but I would say I probably enjoy this version better than the original, and that's, once again, probably one of the few times you're going to hear me say that. After that, we have This Train Don't Stop There Anymore. Actually, I think the original was entitled This Train Don't Stop Here Anymore, but here it's entitled This Train Don't Stop There Anymore. Performed by Roseanne Cash and Emmylou Harris. Really like this rendition. There's not a whole lot of radical reinvention going on here, but the personalities of the two artists doing this rendition really shine through, and that's what gives you something new to hear. And, of course, this song is off of Songs from the West Coast. It's the song that closes the album. Love the original version. Enjoying this version, too. Finally, to close off this particular disc is Willie Nelson performing Border Song. And I think what works for me about this particular rendition is the instrumentation, the arrangement. This has, how shall I say, it definitely has a country Americana sound, but it also has a very urban sound to it. I can just really kind of just feel a real urban city streets quality to it, in my opinion. I'm surprised at how well this is all fused together. You know, it's Willie Nelson. You know, he's going to sing it like Willie Nelson. You either like that or you don't. I'm fine with it. So that completes these two albums. Of course, both these albums are being released, you know, as part of the 50th anniversary, and of course the announcement of, you know, Elton John's 3-year farewell tour before his retirement. And last week there was a special on CBS presented by the Grammy Awards, tribute to Elton John, which featured many of these same performers who appeared on these two discs, appearing on the TV show performance, them performing Elton John songs. Elton John also performed. If you saw it, hopefully you got to see it. It was a very worthwhile telecast. A lot of great performances, and if not, maybe you can, I'm sure, hopefully you can find the performances on YouTube. I'm sure they're out there that you can check them out. These two albums are, of course, available for streaming on Tidal, Spotify, and Apple Music. Go check them out. If you're an Elton John fan, you owe it to yourself to do so. And let me know what you thought. What were your favorite remakes? Do you agree with what I've said? Are there any songs that you disagree with me on? Feel free to share your thoughts, or if you just want to yell at me, you can do that too, and I'll probably just ignore you. Everybody, thank you so much for watching as always, and I do appreciate it very much. Please click subscribe if you haven't done so, and if you do click subscribe, be sure to click that bell icon, notification, so that way you can know when I make new videos. Take care, everybody. Bye. Up next is My Father's Gun, performed by Miranda Lambert.